there's a facade in crypto where we're quite short-termism in terms of how we're thinking about news cycles, attention spans, and this type of thing. That for me is actually a mistake, having been around in crypto for so long. I think actually it's much better to approach these things as a gardener would, as an old Italian grandma at an allotment might be thinking about doing a little bit a lot. And so within that type of a framing.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Flywheel, your number one source for everything crypto, DeFi, and all that's in between. If you want to know what's going on in the world on chain, well, you've come to the right place. This is DeFi Dave here with capital K, and we are here to help you harness the power of the flywheel. And this time around, we go on the cybernetic flywheel. We talk about everything from feedback loops to cults to Berachain. I think you may know where we're going with this. We have on Jani, the legend himself, on the pod. And I feel like Jani needs no introduction, founder of the Honey Jar Venture Studio, has brought a bunch of different projects to the forefront, including Honeycomb, Henlo, and others. And we get deep philosophically in this one. This is definitely for the word cells out there. If you want to know about, cybernetic philosophy, everything about it, everything about feedback loops and what makes cults tick and what makes cults last, this is the episode for you. Kit, any thoughts on this one? Anything that the listener go in with?
Janitor is called janitor because he sweeps.
Let's save that for the episode. The guy listened to the episode. So let's get into it. But before we do, go ahead, hit that bell button, subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what you think, give us a like, follow us on all of our socials on Twitter X, TikTok, and Telegram at Flywheel DeFi. You can follow me on Twitter X at DeFiDay22.
You can follow me at 0x_K.
And let's get the flywheel spinning. All right, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of Flywheel. And I don't take that lightly. This is a very special episode. We have on the one and only Jani. I would describe Jani as many things. He's a cult as a service extraordinaire, a meme magician. He's the co-founder of the Honey Jar, which has brought Honeycomb, soon Henlo, and many other things. Jani is an absolute force on the timeline, just like a nonstop force of stream of consciousness autism, honestly. Like prepping for this interview, I was just scrolling. I mean, I've been following you for a while. We've been following each other for a minute, but like really diving in and like scrolling your feed, and then also like the doc that you sent me, I just like went all in, and like certain things of what you, yeah. Oh, what?
Sorry for your loss.
Sorry for no. More like thank you for my gain. Honestly, I love this shit. And so like when like going through your doc, like certain things like stuck out to me, and like we could like there's a million different directions we could take this interview, but certain things, like I said, stuck out. And yeah, I've prepared a list of questions, and thank you so much for hopping on and reaching out.
Henlo.
Yeah, it's funny saying like Henlo, like actually saying it compared to like seeing it online. It feels like a lot weirder.
Say if you take nothing else from this interview, it's my gift to you and you, dear listener, watcher, whenever this goes out. Crypto is quite often quite an intimidating thing to transmit to another human being, but if you say hello to them, you're off to a good start.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more. And getting into it, what is your background? You've been in crypto for 10 years, and a big thing about crypto and a big thing I want to get into in this interview is cults. And I want to know, like, in your time in crypto over the past 10 years, what have you noticed about cults in your past lives and past things you've been involved in?
So I've been around the block. So I was in crypto when Vitalik was still working at or writing for Bitcoin Magazine, kind of pre-Ethereum white paper. And the city that I was in at the time was kind of one of the hubs where a lot of activity and crypto shit was happening. And so one of the things that I've carried through with me from those early days is essentially a pretty steadfast understanding that we're making up the future as we go in the present, but drawing the past with us. And the skill I think that I've maintained from that period is keeping a fresh perspective on the fact that we're making this shit up, and actually you need to be just as much a poet as you need to be an engineer, just as much as maybe you need to be a sci-fi writer. So much of the tech that we take as normal now was at one point kind of sci-fi stories. And so in terms of the question of what lessons have there been to learn from each of those different phases is what do we even mean by cult? Like it's a word that we actually throw around a lot, but in terms of etymology, the way that Jani drills down into it is quite commonly, I think, what we're meaning is stuff around narrative, some type of persona upon whom you can kind of project. There's often some association with kind of some type of authority figure, at its most extreme, maybe authoritarianism. It's quite often associated with kind of some type of isolationism, so kind of a separation away from, say, a mainstream body. And then it's also kind of in its contemporary form, often a thing where it's difficult to leave. So actually, if you go back to kind of the Latin root, cultus, it's actually a lot more kind of close to cultivation, so growing, analogies from nature and this type of thing. And actually that's the source for me personally that I've always drawn more from, is this kind of drawing from this notion of growing and cultivating sustainable systems, sustainable practices. And so for me, I think on both of those sides over the last few years, it's pretty clear when we've had kind of cults of personality that have not ended well. So that's the more kind of, let's say, crypto's version of Jonestown rolling out. But on the flip side, like broadly speaking as a whole, as a ecosystem, crypto, I think when you look at it more as a natural system and self-sustaining, broadly speaking, in that cultist form, I think you can see a lot of examples of that over time. I don't know. I was saying to both of you before the call, it's quite late my side, so you're getting kind of the free association chaos Jani brain rather than the shape rotator. So if there's anything that I say that you want to drill down or double tap into, just stop me at any point, because I've got a bit of a reputation for just going off on one.
Yeah, noted. Yeah. So you mentioned, maintaining a fresh perspective. And I think something that a lot of people fall into the trap of is they get too comfortable or they get too dogmatic and they just stay in their ways and they can't evolve or adapt to the times. Like there's still people that are stuck in 2014 in Bitcoin land. There's still people stuck. And as we've seen recently, Ethereum maxis that can't get out of their mindset. How do you kind of refresh yourself and kind of rejuvenate yourself and like, in a way, like give yourself a rebirth when it comes to like getting new perspectives and figuring out like what new cults are actually or what new cults are actually worth pursuing?
I fuck around and find out, to be honest. So for me, kind of the anonymity skit is kind of a practice just as much as it is anything else. So this is not the first time that I have kind of stood up an identity from scratch without commingling it with any prior identities. And part of that practice is essentially...
that's really fucking hard. That's really hard. Okay, kudos to you.
It's have you tried it before?
Yeah, I have.
Like, but have you gone all in?
Have I gone? Oh, I've gone pretty in before. I've gone in more times than others. And I guess part of me is like, it's out of necessity. And part of me is like, if it's like not a serious thing, it's kind of like, I'm kind of proud of like what I created and I like want people to know, but I like maintaining like a separation from it. So for example, I guess ETH Bushwick, it's not like a secret that I'm a part of it, but it's not like I'm like pushing it out there. Like, yes, this is like my thing. It's more of like me like cultivating and guiding an idea and pushing it forward rather than like, yes, this is like my thing, like being a figurehead of it. But there are other things in the past that I've done where it's like, I've been pretty all in.
I think one of the things that you're doing with ETH Bushwick, I really like it in the sense that it's kind of a localized expression of not just kind of the crypto community there, but it's very kind of fixed in a location. That's you're wearing one of the hats, right?
Yes, this is our new hats.
But I guess what I mean about we'll get into this, but one of the things that people I was just getting off a DM with some 100 follower account, and they were like, "How do I make the best use of my time in Bera?" And we'll get more into this later on, but it's pertinent to this kind of question. I think with the current meta around airdrops and this type of thing, a lot of it, historically we were rewarded for shallow engagement, but the meta has shifted, and I think increasingly many people, quite understandably so, are kind of arriving at the conclusion that that isn't a strategy that's yielding the greatest reward. So then it becomes a question of where can I go deep? So when I asked you, have you gone all in before? I think for me, when I say all in, it's there have been times where I've maintained 3 separate anon identities, but I wasn't maintaining a face docs. And so the way I was showing up was purely related to which of those zones was I getting the most response and engagement from. And each of those zones I chose purely for the kind of autistic interest of kind of what was happening in that zone. So in some instances, the social graph does have some crossover just from the timeline, but there are some instances where I've got an entirely different social graphs in totally different zones that, to be honest, don't touch kind of, let's say, token crypto. So that would be more kind of the P2P networking realm, for example, where they're kind of, to be honest, anti-token. So this is a bit the thing, right? Is we are creatures of habit. We're creatures of routine. So in the way that we move around our cities, whether it's the coffee shops we go to, whether it's if you're studying or where you go for your workplace, where you live, there's not that much deviation. And I'd say that the same follows for kind of our online movements. But even if let's say you check Discord, Twitter, Telegram, maybe some other sites that are your usual things. It's gone even more granular than that these days when, for example, we in crypto all say, okay, I log in and into the trenches and I do my time in Twitter. That's kind of further localized in the sense of each of our kind of algorithmic tunnels that we're in. There might not be a lot of crossover. So you can be kind of in what's ostensibly called the town square, but having entirely kind of different zones. So by maintaining kind of separate areas of interest, you can kind of see really quite different zones of the internet and people showing up and the practices, rituals, and these are kind of all aspects where I can understand why people say cult. The rituals, practices, ways of engaging, how are new people kind of invited in or excluded, in-group, out-group, this type of thing. And so to answer your question, it's just really clear, like when you're in a zone where people are just having a lot of banter, and it doesn't matter if you have 5 followers and you're following one person, That was the on-ramp to Bera. The first things that I did was started an egg account. And at the time, it was the tail end of, let's say, DeFi summer, heading towards the kind of burning wreckage of what was going to be a few years. But in the Bera eco, people were just vibing. And so, that for me has been pretty much the whole journey since the end of 2013. So I've been full-time crypto since, end of 2013. And it's this kind of practice of just following the dopamine, to use a kind of neurospicy catchphrase, has pretty much just paid dividends the entire journey.
Yeah, one thing that basically came up when preparing for this episode that really stuck out is feedback loops. And everything that you just said, you're kind of like A/B testing different communities that you're in. You're seeing the response, seeing how people react, and then you're whatever zone that you're in, you then go about and do a certain action. Everything's kind of like, I wouldn't say like off the it's a bit off the cuff, but it's like intentional at the same time. And going into feedback loops, another word that I saw in my research was Cybernetics, which really caught my eye, which is kind of the study of systems and the feedback loops in those systems. I'm curious, going into Cybernetics, and then we can go more into Berachain. Like, what exactly is Cybernetics? How does crypto advance? How does Cybernetics advance crypto? And how has it evolved from Bitcoin to Berachain? Because Bitcoin, the Cybernetics, that feedback loop was, running the miners, and it was like this, it was the first blockchain. And now we've had all these different systems and experiments that have come up, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's, all these other blockchains, and now Berachain. I just want to get your thoughts on all that.
So I'm a hobbyist cybernetician, or kind of more just reading about the history of it and this type of thing. So just at a super high level, I understand it as the study of systems, control mechanisms, and then feedback loops. So it's kind of, broadly speaking, the kind of layer that I operate at. And I think the thing that caught my attention with Bitcoin when it kind of first came up was having a digital system that was endogenous, that was able to compel some type of action in the real world. So the consumption of electricity. It to my mind, jumped from cyberspace to the corporeal realm. And it did this through kind of the release, and this has been kind of spoken about since time ad nauseum, but the way my brain understood it is there was this kind of a box, and this is kind of borrowing from kind of Unix principles of kind of do one thing, do it well, keep it simple, kind of treat stuff as an input and an output. But if you kind of look at Bitcoin in that type of a form, it's this box, and it's self-contained. The tokens within it aren't kind of exogenously pulled in; they're endogenous to this box. They don't have a reference point to the outside world. However, it does need the outside world in the form of electricity, computation, and this type of thing. Essentially, everything that we have produced in this industry since is seeking to find different ways to compel action in the corporeal realm. So when we're talking about cults, when we're talking about like the overall growth metrics and this type of stuff, for me, it's not deep. It's not that complicated. We're essentially trying to understand what are the mechanisms that we can essentially draw in, whether it's electricity or kind of human effort and this type of thing. And that's pretty much kind of feeds into the entire way that we've built out THJ. It's kind of been how I've operated in the space since the early days. And yeah, each different blockchain that comes out, really the question for me is which new levers for compelling action in the outside world is this enabling? And to be honest for you, anything that's to do with speed at least to my mind, in terms of looking at controls and looking at different levers and feedback, it's not a lever that's jumped out at me per se. But when I read the Berachain white paper, I can't remember if it was 2021, 2022, I saw something that I kind of recognized from more natural systems and kind of other cybernetic kind of papers, in the sense that there was more flow controls, essentially.
What do you mean by flow controls? You mean like the whole proof of liquidity system?
So for the most part, in the rudimentary, so there was kind of proof of work, proof of stake, kind of these kind of mechanisms where the token issuance within these endogenous boxes, and how they kind of get people to run the software using electricity. I hadn't seen something where it actually played with that level of actors, so looking at the validator level and kind of compelling some type of different behavior set from those folks, since POW, POS, and yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay, you were saying before about airdrops and how it really promotes very shallow behavior, very low value behavior. I'm curious, what do you think can be improved about airdrops? And basically, if you like chunk up a bit, it's basically like these feedback loops. How do you get like, instead of low value behavior, high value behavior? And how have you done that in the honey jar?
In this, I agree with Smokey, in the sense that if, broadly speaking, we're looking at the overall compelling movement in the corporeal realm, essentially we want people to come and use stuff. So typically there's been an over-index of TVL versus TTD. So
what's TTD?
I just made it up, so I'm going to tell you about it. TVL, total value locked, historically has been far exceeding the requirements of the TTD, the things to do on chain. So really, people don't care about a massive amount of TVL. They more care about, is there sufficient liquidity in it? They don't even think in terms of liquidity. It's more in terms of, am I able to do a thing that I want to do? And how many of these things that I want to do are there? And everything that's surplus to the ability to do things, so things to do, is kind of, from a systems design point of view, kind of inefficient systems design from that type of a perspective. So I'd say for general people, for the most part, I don't give a fuck how my toaster works. I just want my toaster to work. I quite like having a toaster, a microwave, a fridge, and this type of thing. In the digital realm, whether it's games, whether it's Gamblefy, whether it's Socialfy, whether it's all of these different things, really it's the app layer that ultimately, the trajectory that we're on, we're not going to be thinking about what chain we're on. We're not going to be thinking about all of this other stuff. And so fundamentally, and this is what I was saying, I agree with Smokey, is really the game in town is things for people to do, or things for entities to do. So there's obviously different stakeholders in the game, whether it's financial systems, traditional kind of folks and entities from the financial realm, through to kind of the consumer end of the spectrum. Yeah.
And so what have you noticed, like in your time in Berachain so far, like what have you noticed are the things to do, and not just like just things to do? I feel like you've created your own things to do, honestly, with everything you've come out with from the honey jar, with Honeycomb, and other, things to do. I'll let you take it from here. So
I was fucking around in my background's in data analytics. I've come from like a TradFi background. I've spent a long time in crypto with different hats. I've worked doxed, anon, in-person, remote, all of these different kind of things. So in and around DeFi summer, I was kind of in the trenches fucking around, whilst also working at the same time. And one of the things that I was messing around with at the time was, and one of these kind of pools of attention and narrative building was around Olympus DAO. And there's this whole narrative around kind of 9.9, people using leverage product built by kindergartens, apparently, to kind of loop on the ohm. And where other people were kind of doubling down that road, I was leveraging into pictures of bears smoking bongs. This was around November. And at a certain point, I was the largest holder of these pictures of bears smoking bongs. I should have asked right at the top, in terms of your listener base, are they kind of more shape rotators or are they more word cell people? Like, I guess I should have checked in from your perspective, like how deep in the reads are your kind of watches?
I'd
with
say they're
Bera?
pretty deep with, I'd say in terms of shape rotator to word cell, I say they're both. Maybe they're slightly more shape rotator just because this is a pretty deep podcast. With Berachain, we've been covering Bear since September 2021 when we had 0xD21 on, and we actually cut out a clip of like secrets of Berachain. And I remember after that clip, Smokey reached out to me for the first time, and that was the first time I actually dived into Berachain. And you know, me and Kid have been huge fans ever since. And like even back in 2022, when I met Smokey, Dev, and Papa for the first time, I'm like, wow, this is it. And I wasn't even just talking from a PL perspective, but from like a cultural perspective or from a cult perspective. You just kind of felt the energy that was there. And even though there were like all these other L1s and L2s, and like if you didn't look that deep, it's like, oh, like why is this is just another L1? And I was trying to tell people like, no, this is not just another L1. This is a culture. This is like something way different.
I think the reason that I asked that is just because in sharing this arc, I don't want to kind of repeat repeat stuff which may have been covered, but it's unclear to me whether this part of Bearer law is that widely known. So I'll go into it. And it's kind of the macro is contained in the micro in this particular type of a sense. But the Bong bears, in terms of the NFTs, they rebase. So what that means is you've got different generations. There's going to be, I think, 7 of them in total. The first were kind of very small in supply. There's 101 accidental one, and then 6 honoraries. And then there was a mechanism through which people who owned some of these would get airdropped or kind of claim dropped some more, and then there'd be some kind of expansion in supply each generation. So at the time, and that was in some way not a response, but influenced by or inspired by some of kind of the rebasing narrative around kind of different DeFi stuff at the time. So there's already a small little bit of, this is NFTs, but it's done a wee bit different. And so even just having that small different thing to do to kind of understand, it lets the number crunchers get out and go, okay, if one bear is not one bear is 7 bears. Like if you have one of the Bong bears, then you'd get one of the next ones, which was Bond. And then because you have 2 bears, then you'd get 2 extra boos. So then you have 4. And then in the next gen, you'd get 8 of the babies. So we were at the time, you know, as the wider markets were kind of doing their thing and kind of crashing out, the kind of speculative, irrational bubble around Olympus kind of popped. A lot of people got wrecked. I had the largest number of bears of anyone on planet Earth. To be honest, in terms of emotional landscape, I then futurecast to, I'm going to have to explain this to my accountant and also other people in my life as to what are these things that are incredibly expensive. And
what attracted you to these bears, to the Bong bears to begin with when you first saw them?
How did I react?
I mean, what attracted you to them? Like, why'd you go so all in to begin with?
It's what, like, I saw folks like DCF, Zeus, Wartle. There is a certain element of like, I don't quite get it, but there's something there that these big brains seem to be repping them. And I think, like, I didn't get the monkeys, I didn't get a lot of other stuff, like it wasn't quite there. So I was like, okay, I understand there is something happening here in the kind of NFT thing. And then also, to be honest, there was like a lot of irrational exuberance around the amount of leverage I was taking out is you know, not advised. Don't do this at home, kids. But when the markets completely started crashing, I guess you could say I was a captured audience, if I'm honest, captured by sense of shame, sense of guilt, sense of what the fuck have I done? But then in that process, the community around these things, the culture was very irreverent, self-fudding, like having a lot of fun. And having been through as many cycles as I have been, you can kind of see the early signs of, okay, stuff's but like the ass is falling out of this thing and we're entering into a different mode in the cycle. And bears, it's just best to find some people who you can vibe with and build in and around there. And I'm very much, I go where the dopamine leads me, essentially. And so at that time, I started just doing stuff like working from the understanding that it's within the NFT game, it's better either to have the most rare or the cheapest, most common. Those are the two zones where you're going to get the most easy liquidity. And so in my brain, I was already thinking, okay, I need to get my ducks in a row here. So I started doing stuff with the community, where I do stuff like I'll swap one Bond Bear, which was the Gen 2 underneath Bong Bear, for 3 of the Boo Bears, for example. So people would be like, a lot of people came forward for those types of trades and they're like, yes, I'm trading up. And to my mind, I was like, well, I'm not just getting 3 extra bears there, I'm getting 3 and then another 3 from the next, and then 6 and then 12. And so to my mind was like, and I think this is where the janitor name came from, because got it from kind of sweeping, was like he who owns the floor gets access to the liquidity. And the reason I'm sharing this kind of story is a lot of the stuff that we've done with THJ, to be honest, when we launched it in 2023, just to be completely frank with you, I was just looking for a way to sell a Bong Bear for like $1 million. I was like, what's the best way that I can do this? I put a Bong Bear into a smart contract and I kind of built this Honeycomb system. So there was 16,420. I should say I found someone who was kind of mentally deranged and said, hey, do you want to build this with me? They said yes pretty quickly. And then I had the idea of, okay, if we sell the 16,420 honeycombs for like $100 each, I get to exit my Bong Bear. Someone wins a Bong Bear, everyone's happy. However, a lot of the way that I work and operate is very much in the open. I think out loud. With each new identity, form an entirely different lexicon, way of speaking, pattern of speech, posting pattern, just to fall into the character. And in the process of, and I'd been doing that for kind of a year by that point. At a certain point, Smokey had reached out to me and said, you're a very large holder of these bears. We're building a thing. Would you like to look into it? Having been around as long as I've been around, I kind of saw early versions of the Ethereum paper, the kind of Cosmos paper, Polkadot, as not the final versions, but kind of in rooms with people as they were arguing about, hey, what about this and this type of thing. That's not to say I deserved to be in those rooms. It's just that crypto is such a weird type of a space. You can be kind of a left curve oddity in a space with kind of super big brains. Like I'm often the dumbest person in the room. But I find myself in rooms where there's people, it's at the very outer realms of my capacity to kind of absorb what's going on. And I'd say that that has contributed to a ability for me to kind of get a sense for when I see something really super fresh. And so when I read the early version of what has become the docs with Berachain, I saw that they were messing with the economic way that validators have to relate with apps. And I immediately was like, we didn't have the tech, the tooling, the experience, the ecosystem prior to this period of time for something like this. And so I jumped into the seed round for that. And so having done that, kind of a captured audience, feeling shame, wanting to get out of it, being the type of person that I am, kind of rambling in the open on Twitter. I'd been running too many identities, so Discord kept rugging. I couldn't actually get into the Discord. Every time I did, it booted me out because it thought I was a bot. Fair enough. I'm questioning that myself sometimes. But it just meant that 100% of my kind of navigating the space was happening in Twitter, just stream of consciousness. And so this is all a long way of saying that once we put together this Honeycomb project, people very quickly, it showed me how many people were actually preparing for Berachain, because all of these people started coming and going, hey, can we partner with you? So I think in the 2 months that we were building in the open, by the end of that point, we had nearly 40 partnerships lined up where they were like, we want to give some type of a perk to Honeycomb. And so that's when I started to realize there's actually something here. When BD starts doing itself, when there's not even a, hey, do you want to do a logo times logo announcement? When it's not even that, it's a, like, I want to integrate with you because I can see what you're doing. It solves a problem that I have. It's not even, we don't even need to do the announcement. I think that for me is kind of an expression of this kind of, let's say, cybernetic cult, where you're dealing with Lego bricks, where there's an input and output. You're looking to solve a problem, you plug it in. And that was when the narrative around kind of a perks aggregator started to emerge. I'd say, I don't know, I'd say we were one of the early movers in that type of thing. Like we've had airdrops for Honeycomb. I know I'm bouncing all over this shop, but you asked for a late night episode, so here we are, late night with Jani.
I love it. Yeah.
The average buy-in price of Honeycomb's already been covered by the 5 airdrops it's already received from Layer 0, Sweeper, Dyad, Unicorn, and Plug. So people, like, on average, have already kind of sweep. And about the launch, so we launched at the beginning of March. A big part of Bearer religion is fudding yourself is one, and also kind of meme maths and meme numbers. So we, I think, launched on the 3rd of March, so 3/3, which happened to coincide with ETH Denver. ETH Denver is historically the most cursed event in the crypto calendar to launch something on. So I was like, that's fantastic, let's do it. And then within 2 weeks, we had the run on the Silicon Valley Bank. And so I was like, this is fucking great. This is absolutely perfect. We minted out during that time and we decided to launch our brand. We were like, okay, there's a lot of further loss of faith in establishments. Let's just straight up call ourselves what we are. So advertising then became, we're a cult, we're a Ponzi, we're definitely a scam. And I think that type of just irreverent approach to things has just kind of has attracted a bunch of
It's a filtering
energy.
mechanism.
Yeah, it's about like that they're not taking themselves seriously, but they're taking their work seriously, I think is one of the big things. But yeah, maybe I'll pause there.
I was going to ask, you mentioned real integrations as compared to just like, oh, an announcement, like here's the logo, blah, blah, blah. With Honeycomb, because it was basically your experiment of how can I like get $1 million for my Bong Bear, but it was an NFT. Like, what real integrations did you see or did you have with the Honeycomb? So you mentioned the airdrops. You said something about an aggregated perps DEX. But yeah, I'm curious, like what real integrations you had with the Honeycomb.
I mean, at the time, so we've been one of the reasons that I disagree with this whole kind of cult narrative is in its contemporary form, it typically is defined as a difficulty in the process of leaving. That's broadly speaking. One of the things that I love about the Bera eco is that it's really easy to get involved. And there's nothing stopping you from going, nothing, but no one does. It's like, could leave, definitely not leaving. And
it's Hotel California. Once you come in, you can never leave, but by choice.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's the one. And you see that reflected. So the thing that was interesting about Honeycomb, and I should mention all of this we did with no real input from the foundation. There's a funny story around ETH Denver when we were running what we called a Carnival of Chaos, and Papa and Smokey rolled through in the kind of Discord stage that we had running, and they shared a story. And that was that we had created such chaos on the timeline. Like it was such a takeover, at least in our algorithmic tunnel, that when they were at an investor dinner with a whole bunch of stuff, there was kind of some type of investor or VC firms trying to claim that because it was all being produced in a chaotic, permissionless, anonymous way, they had people trying to claim that Honeycomb was that like they were the ones behind this type of thing. And or people were coming up to them and being like, how are you doing this like marketing activation or whatever? And the reality is, until quite recently, the Berachain Foundation, they didn't really spend very much on marketing at all, if anything. I think it was like the maximum was maybe a bar tab at ETH Denver.
I was there. I remember that.
It was basically nothing. And I had I'd been messaging with Smokey backwards and forwards on Telegram, just sporadically. But for the most part, we've always just done our thing. They've never blocked us from like doing our thing. They've never tried to kind of come in and say, hey, this or that. And the reason that I bring this up is just quite often we would get mistaken for the foundation.
Yeah, and so, I feel like that still happens.
Yeah, we have to put a lot of effort into, since in the age of the request for proposals that they've done, which is a super big brain move, because again, it's like a time saving mechanism. It's kind of standardizing the ability for ecosystem apps to get access to liquidity in a bit. So it's avoiding 400 different teams going and having 400 different conversations, so that the Royco product is super fucking big brain.
Yeah, we had him on the show.
Also, yeah, it's very humble of the foundation to have kind of made a kind of advance on the layer zero approach of essentially saying there is such an organic culture here that actually those of you who are at the front lines and in the trenches and have developed your own. So I mentioned it earlier, but we're creatures of habit. we tend to go to this to a similar set of spots. And it's the same in the Bera eco. You've got people whose like three main things they do are maybe Raymond, Yeet, and something else. And what the foundation has kind of, I think, made a good call with is essentially saying, you folks actually know the community and what they want and how they're using your stuff in a useful way better than we do. And so this request for proposal mechanism that they have kind of is a way of getting value to people who are the most likely to be sticky users. So I've never seen something. I've never seen something. In my entire time here, an L1 has never launched into as thriving a culture. And this is a bit what I mean about. And targetable in a cybernetic way. So this is what I mean by cybernetic culture, because without getting into the specifics of other L1s, one of the distinguishing features of the cybernetic culture that is Berachain is if I want to, I can target subsets of users who demonstrate cult-like behavior. What might cult-like behavior be? It's people who are around within certain periods when stuff was sticky, people who do totally nonsensical stuff for seemingly no gain other than funny stuff. So there's 20% of the supply of ETARD NFTs have just been burnt by people sending them to a burn address just because it's funny, like for no other reason. So that's a subset of, okay, there's a couple of hundred people there who are kind of diehard humorous people. With Honeycomb, to jump around, we launched it, although it was like, everyone told me I was nuts for making the collection so large. We sold out within 2 weeks. We had 0 insider allocation, 0. Nothing went to VCs, nothing went to the team, nothing went to KOLs. Anything that the team or any kind of investor or stuff has always all been market bought. And we gave 40% away to kind of projects and this type of thing. If I want to target who are the people who, despite Honeycomb having got it for free, and despite Honeycomb going up to 0.7 ETH, haven't sold, or they've added to their position. So there's 15% of Honeycomb holders fit that category. If there are all of these different mechanisms and levers where you can identify clusters of actual people who've spent actual money and actual time over the last few years, who've trauma bonded, who've kind of lived with the uncertainty of, is this thing real, is it not, through wars, through kind of presidents getting shot, through bank runs, through FTX unwinding, 3AC exploding, like quite extreme kind of bonding experiences, let's say. And the thing is, no other L1, and I've been here since before Bitcoin wasn't called an L1 when I started getting involved. It was just Bitcoin. People were arguing about should we call it blockchain or DLT. Like it was just like a different time. We haven't had a technology set launching into a primed culture who are hardened in the trenches like this. So it's both, to borrow a phrase from Murad, if we want to go down the meme coin route, we haven't had a technology set launching into a movement. And I think in terms of that, for me, is what's happening. And to be honest, although we're in our own algorithmic tunnel, Honeycomb over the last year is the best performing NFT asset in the entire space over the last 12 months. There are periods where, for example, Schizo posters were above Honeycomb for like 6 weeks or something like that. Honeycomb over the last year is up 12x, and it's been more or less hovering in this type of way. It blows every other NFT out of the water. Can you point me to a single thread from the NFT algorithm tunnels that in any way mentions any bearer stuff at all? We can't,
None.
it just isn't. There's such, last cycle, 80% of new wallets and new market entrants came via NFTs. Like it's still, if you analyze their kind of on-chain behavior and stuff, they're still, some of them are dormant, but there's still assets on chain. Like those are people primed and ready to come. There was research done that tried to, it investigated the behavior of people who'd arrived and entered into crypto via NFTs. And it would ask the question of to what extent did these people move over to DeFi? And it was marginal. It was not very much at all. So in the last cycle, the majority of new entrants came via NFTs. Many of them are still somewhat active. Many are dormant. And those that are active, it's completely bearer, and this type of thing is completely invisible to them. This is interesting to me because it just shows that although in CT, in certain algorithmic bubbles, it can feel like bearer has a lot of mindshare, but there's kind of entire massive zones of the on-chain economy where it's invisible. That to me is, I fucking love that shit. That's such an asymmetric kind of actionable set of alpha. And there's so much of the data is very revealing once you start kind of drilling down. We've got
How do you access these, like, I basically like these, like, it's kind of like dark matter. You can't really see it. Like, how do you access these dark zones and get it out of your algorithmic tunnel? I guess how you do it is you just create entirely new personas, and you go like,
that's dedication. I've not met many people like me, but I think we were saying before the call, we're all wearing masks. I just make it more obvious, right? And there's a certain conflation between how we show up, let's say in crypto, might be different to how we show up with let's say our parents, our kids, friends outside of crypto. So there's different ways that you present yourself in different zones and contexts. But there's also a thing that happens where you self-identify with a persona that you present into the world, and we form an attachment. So it can be difficult to really truly let yourself go into a different zone. That's quite an extreme case. I don't know if it's because of my neurological makeup. I find it easy to switch and kind of don't have too much of a attachment to like whatever. To be honest, no one in my real life, they know I do tech stuff. That's it. They don't know I do crypto. Or they know I do crypto in the sense that like they can talk to me about crypto, but they don't know this. And the reason I bring this up is you don't need to go as far as this. So for example, recently, and this is a bit what I mean about one of the metrics that I use for kind of assessing the richness of let's say the fertilizer of cybernetic kind of cult activity is time to first response. So if I indicate some interest in something, how long is it before someone who has that interest interacts with me? So in the example, so recently after Token, I think a lot of us have been kind of looking into the meme coin stuff and Murad's metrics and this type of thing. And so I was like, okay, I don't disagree with some of what you're saying. Let me find out about SPX type of stuff. And so I was openly asking on the timeline, I actively want to learn more about SPX. What, like, show me. I want to be SPX pilled. No responses in 24 hours, except a few bears were like, hey, you can do this and this. And that to me was quite revealing. However, I mentioned in one offhand comment about Sproto gremlins, and then within 2 hours, my entire fucking notification and feed was red, blue, yellow. So that's from the Jani account. And that was like, okay, I was like, there's something with the Sproto gremlins, with Bitcoin, ticker Bitcoin. that is kind of Trench's thing, because you can see it. I'm not colorblind. I can, even if I was colorblind, I'd see these weird little fucked up generative funky dudes. And so I was like, okay, for us at TSJ, it makes much more sense to create some edge and interchange with the ticker Bitcoin folk than it does with SPX folk, because go where the crowd is. Don't try and move people to you.
Do you think that's because there's more overlap between the Bear community and Bitcoin communities there is between the Bear community and SPX community? Maybe they're just in like another dark zone. And if you had like a different persona per se that was closer to SPX, you would get more of the ions. I remember I was going to say, I remember last year I tweeted something, like I tweeted one thing and like I wasn't even trying to like get the SPX guys. I didn't even know they existed. But all of a sudden I had like 20 of those like guys just like rated my tweet. And then like I tweeted something else and like the same thing. And then they were like in my DMs. And this was in October last year. I was like, whoa, there's something here.
And that's a part of one of the reasons I asked, what do we even mean by cult? Do we mean it in the contemporary Jonestown Kool-Aid sense, or like, the SBF style FTX, like death by cucumber? Or do we mean like cultus in the kind of Latin sense of to cultivate, to grow? So actually, outside of crypto, I spend a lot of my time gardening. It's the actual touching grass thing. And one of the reasons for this is the temporality differential. And what I mean by that is there's a facade in crypto where we're quite short-termism in terms of how we're thinking about news cycles, attention spans, and this type of thing. That for me is actually a mistake, having been around in crypto for so long. I think actually it's much better to approach these things as a gardener would, as an old Italian grandma at an allotment might be thinking about doing a lot. And so within that type of a framing, there can be seasons where you'll have like raid seasons by particular crews where it's they're particularly rich and like on it and this type of thing. So it could just be at the moment for my Algo Dark Zone, the SPX crew, to be honest, like it's so well performing. One of the things that can happen to communities when stuff goes really well is people kind of tap out a bit from the trenches because they've made a lot of money. This kind of, it just happens. It's just kind of a feature. I think the thing to bring this back to Bera is like, there's a lot of us who, we're here by choice. Like we've made a lot of money, more than enough to not do this stuff. I was at Token recently at Bear Rave in sweltering heat, wearing this fucking ridiculous outfit for 12 hours. Like, you couldn't pay me to do that. I'm doing that of my own free will for the bit because it's contributing to something that I think actually has a connection with a lot of life force. And going back to this, I think a misuse of this word cult is, again, this thing of people can leave Bera, and they've had a lot of reason to leave Bera with the amount of time it's taken. I remember back when Ethereum was first getting released, and I'd be on calls with like people who'd put money into the ICO, and they were like screaming at the script. They were so angry. There was so much anger at why is this taking so long and this type of thing. Like, it's quite a common thing for that kind of like things take longer than we expect them to. It's not particular to Berachain, especially when you're innovating at the layers that they are. But the reason I bring this up is there's been so much good reason for people to move on, but the rate of atrophy is so low for exceptional builders doing really interesting things. Once they arrive and kind of tap into this kind of culture, and I'm using that in the truest type of a sense, and I mean it, I think it's much more sustainable and long-sustaining than cults in as they're used, because cultures are kind of natural systems which can persist over time through great changes, through different seasons, and this type of thing. But the thing about the launch with Honeycomb is it started as a way for me to get one to 2 mil for this Bong Bear, so that I could just be like, cool, don't have to feel embarrassed anymore, traded my way out of that, it's cool. But the amount of inbound people who thought I was the foundation, and I was like, I was like, this is surely
the
not,
culture that you cultivated with the Honeycomb.
Well, not even. People mistaked me for the foundation, and so I would have to so often be like, yo, here's this major project. I'd set up a DM between Smokey and this person and then bounce. And once that just kept happening, I was like, holy shit, like, this is a who's who of everyone, like, exceptional in the space is getting sucked into this thing. I don't think I'm meant to be seeing this. They think I work at the foundation. I do not. So I tried my best to, like, pass off bounce. Because again, I was anon, so I'm like, the thing with building anon is it's every step matters. Like, trust is extremely slow to build and extremely fast to burn. It holds you to the level of accountability that you need when you walk around like what I'm walking around is exceptionally high. It's very easy to sow the seeds of doubt. And so I walked away from that kind of 1 to 2 million Bong Bear sale and just like plowed it back into THJ because the BD was doing itself. Like, never before had I been involved in a project where people very proactively are like, we want to integrate with you. So to loop back to a question you asked about 20 minutes ago, which actual integrations has Honeycomb got? I'm going to flip it and say pretty much any project building in the Bera eco has integrated Honeycomb in some type of a way, whether it's boosted yields, whether it's discount on fees, whether it's airdrop, whether it's guaranteed whitelist or some subsets. So we've got about 50 plus of these kind of coming down the chain once the chain launches. And there was something that someone said at Singapore, which Smokey kind of quote tweeted, which quite a few people had commented on, and that is where is all of the innovation in DeFi on ETH gone? Like, where is everyone?
I feel like I said that. They went to Berachain.
Was that? Yeah.
I think, yeah.
It's pretty, like, when you go around and you speak to the 100 different teams about what they're doing and the novel application, it's not that, there's a lot of people like me who've made fine money. We could do whatever, but we choose to show up. And then suddenly there's silence on ETH. Like, it's just not, it's a mistake to think that there aren't people building wacky shit because they love this shit. Like, a really large percentage of builders who, and that's kind of a bit what you get with the EVM equivalents of Berachain. It doesn't cost more on the technical layer to build in Bera. The cost has been time. And actually, I don't know necessarily if that's been the worst thing, just the universal kind of laws of macro and this type of thing, if it's necessarily been the worst thing to not launch into kind of the sentiment that we've had on ETH. Yeah.
And I'm going to ask, so we've talked about cults a lot here, and we have a definition of cults that it's more like Jonestown, like, oh, it's much more passive, people get indoctrinated, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, your definition of cult, as you said, goes back to more of the old Latin Greek root of what cult is. I would, could you spell out more, like a more detailed, descriptive definition of this new definition of cult that you have? It's something much more of like, much more active than the previous definition.
So before I get there, you humor me. Web 2 has taught us that we're the product. Now, that's not actually a problem. The problem is in the power dynamics and where value flows from that basis. Typically speaking, in Web 2, as the product, we are dysregulated and then in an effective state sold off to the highest bidder, whoever that bidder is, the profits of which are privatized and spent on whatever. So actually, what I'd say Honeycomb is, and this gets into the active versus passive, is Honeycomb is a wrapper for a community to productize itself, but to receive the benefit of being that product. So what is that product? So our in THJ, we've got 20 people working now. The way we work is pretty weird. We've not done any team calls other than one. Once Honeycomb minted out and we ooga booga'd at each other and drew pictures on a Miro board. But then other than that, we've had 0 team calls. We're spread across however many different continents. It's entirely async and this type of thing. And the reason I bring that up is our BD team is quite small for the level of output that we have, but it's a mistake to think that our BD team is just those working inside the core team. When you are the product and you're a productized community and you see the benefit of integrations, airdrops, and this type of thing. So we've got 5,500 holders of Honeycomb. It's about 400 more than Miladies, 400 more than Pudgy Penguins. And people are incentivized to go out and tap into their networks. There's a very high degree of kind of smart money and highly networked people who are Honeycomb holders. And they're very proactively going out and doing the hard work of working with teams so that by the time they arrive into speak with our core team, it's just merely about sorting out the details. There's no selling. It's just talking about what is the specific mechanic. And we've got reams of deal sheets now where it's like, oh, you're quite similar to this one. This is what we did here. In which ways do we want to tweak this? I wouldn't say permissionless, because anytime there's deal making to be done, you need to kind of go through some of that stuff, but as near as it can be. And yeah, we do the this times this splash sheet just because that's the kind of the convention. So this question of a new definition of cult, I would actually say that one of the ways in which we have kind of innovated in this space is thinking about cybernetic cultures. And that is mechanisms where there are control objects or adaptive objects. Some people call them exoskeletons, which can adapt to the outside input. So Honeycomb, for a Honeycomb holder who is a community member, its adaptive function is to be yield that gives them a proportionate income for the size of the productized community that they're a part of. For the project that's integrating Honeycomb, it is a 0 to 1 kind of cold start problem where, okay, we get access to a rabid 5,500 active users who have a strong, a very high percentage of them, which is demonstrable through consistent activity over years on chain. So you can analyze people's DeFi behavior. We can analyze what happens when drops are received and this type of thing. It allows teams to focus on what they're actually good at, which is building cool shit. So the adaptive function, the exoskeleton of Honeycomb in their hands is they click the button and it's like active community and users. People who hold Honeycomb are also fairly kind of, there's a lot of liquidity in the system as well. So you get a lot of LPs on that front. And so to loop back to that question of kind of the new definition of cult from our perspective, is it's a lot more just looking at ourselves as a natural system. And it's one which can compel movement in the corporeal realm from the digital realm. And that's just it. So cult, from the etymology of the Latin of cultus, meaning to cultivate. And so in this new arc where we're talking about, is it AI coin memes? Is it Murad's kind of well-distributed, kind of like we're going to flip the stock market things? Those are both fine narratives, and we can trade the shit out of anything that we want. We're in an age of financial populism and absurdism. Go for it. If it's fun. I'd say that a pattern that has persisted throughout humanity is that cultures and communities which are self-sustaining can withstand both summertime and wintertime, to use a metaphor, not to get too deep, and that assets and tool spaces that come from cybernetic cultures over the longer form are going to be kind of more sustainable over a longer time horizon than kind of shorter seasoned stuff. Like we've seen, well, I don't know how many years in we are now, since 2010, 2009. We're like halfway through this 36-year kind of horizon of before stuff really gets kind of dominant. Is in 16 years, meme coins going to be the latest version of financial absurdism? I wouldn't bet my Bitcoin on it. Am I sure that cybernetic cultures will be persisting because they're adaptive? I would put my Bitcoin on that.
Got it. And what do you think what the key is for long-term sustainabilities of cults? I feel, in that past, you said, of this episode, you said, hey, like trauma bonding through tough times, different, I guess, like community signals and inside jokes. What are other things, like how can cults be sustainable long-term? What should people look for in those cults? And a final question I wanted to ask is, like, how do you regulate your dopamine levels? Because when you said the gardening hobby that you did, I'm like, okay, so this is a person that's both, locked in online in the trenches, but also has a self-awareness of like, hey, I need to like step out, touch grass. So yeah, the dopamine level question is last. But first question is like long-lasting cults. Like, what's the keys to long-lasting cults?
The question that I'm hearing you ask is, how can you contribute and sustain culture over time?
Yes.
I think economies have a big part to play in this type of stuff, but community and culture is, to my mind, the ability to sustain some type of discoordinated collective effort in some type of a direction across difference. And so a baseline for economies in that type of sense are mechanisms for people to participate in financial flows. I think any time that there's stuff which is like super boom or bust, it's difficult to most people who work as kind of freelancers or contractors, that feast or famine dynamic can appreciate. But where cultures have like a diversity of these types of streams, I think is essentially how you sustain stuff. Yeah, we didn't quite get into the Berachain stuff, but the part of the, we kind of did and we didn't, but this is the thing with Berachain, right? Is like, you can say a lot without actually getting into it. The shorthand for Berachain, I would say, is they've created mechanisms where more value flows back into the system. Anytime that you have systems that are more closed loop, where there's less leaks, are going to be more sustainable. And so the more type of experiments and kind of innovation that we have in that direction will contribute to these types of things. But yeah, I loved the episode with the exponents guys, because I call it the like, hang on, what? Mandelbrot set, because there's
the fractal.
No matter where you are, whether you're left curve or right curve, no matter who you speak to in the Bera eco, we've just spent years with each other just being like, hang on, what? Whether it's kind of like in the meme direction, whether it's in like kind of shape rotation end of the spectrum, and this type of thing, it's just there's a lot to unpack. And so my suggestion to folks who have been used to scrambling around doing shallow engagement in that airdrop hunt is find zones, whether it's Berachain or somewhere else, where you can actually make a concentrated bet with your time. And I'd say that Berachain is one of these zones because of these feedback loops that are kind of sustaining, which I think sustainable cybernetic cultures require. Berachain is one such zone that's kind of at the forefront of that type of financial, societal, kind of cultural cybernetic experiment. In terms of dopamine, gardening really is good, and I've got a cat, so like cats. If
I love
cats,
cats.
I'd have it here like evil overlord, but it's probably asleep. But yeah, gardening is a good one. I find there's a book that I read recently called it's by Cal Newport, Slow Productivity. So it might surprise you. I'm very online and also very offline. So when I'm not online, I'm not online. And I'm doing stuff which is fingers in the soil, working with stuff. The other thing for healing dopamine is doing stuff where it's at a very different cadence and speed. So a lot of crypto can feel go, go, go. The way we built Honeycomb is thinking about it more like an oak tree. It's like, what's this going to look like through different years? And I think bringing different temporalities in mindset into zones can kind of illuminate different ways of approaching things and ways of designing things. And I think in terms of dopamine restoration, it's good. It's good to not always be in the same type of scan mode, but going deep. Drinking enough water. I would say sleep, but my sleep's all fucked up because it's bull. I sleep a lot during the bear, but then I just full engage kind of wartime tism mode during this type of the cycle, but it kind of balances out.
And where can people read more about your definition and take on culture?
I'm writing up some stuff on this now. So when we released a bunch of, we're the highest, I'm the highest grossing author on Mirror. Like every time during the bear, every time we release stuff, we broke Mirror. And so a lot of when I say top growth, I think like 35% of the funds that have been raised on Mirror have been articles written by us about Berachain culture. So if you go to the Mirror for THJ, there's a lot of our historical stuff there, and that's probably where we'll release new stuff coming up. But really, I'd say beyond, like, don't follow Jani. Jani spouts a lot of nonsense. Don't even necessarily come and look at THJ stuff anymore. Like, just go anywhere from any entry point into the Bera eco. A lot of testnets, people they don't fuck with it because there's an initial repulsion because they're normally shitty. I'd say don't make that mistake with Bera. There's actually quite a lot of fun stuff to do. And wherever you end up, whichever app, you'll just get a flavor for the type of crew hanging out in those Discords or Telegrams. And whichever entry point you have into the Bera eco will be a good one. And you can scratch north, south, east, or west, and you're not going to bottom out. We're so spread throughout the ecosystem. It's not even, at some point you'll bump into THJ, but I'd say as an entry point, it's more interesting to find stuff which THJ is not like a part of the main entry point. But yeah, failing that, if you want to come through to the THJ community server, if you've got questions about anything, we first impressions matter. So any questions we're happy to answer. Yeah.
Well, Jani, I think we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you so much for coming on. This was an amazing episode. Kit, I'm sorry we didn't get any input from you, but I feel like you were just sitting there.
No. So it's so crazy because like every single time I think of a question, like Jani literally answers it. And I'm just like that's it was
So
kind of
you
wild. Like
should
it was about like, yeah.
you should that we've actually got. I'm going to get told off. If I weren't the boss, I'd get fired so many times. But you know, if you're a bad employee, rise to my level so people can't fire you. But
Yeah.
we've got like 10 different products that cut across meme coins, meme-fi, social-fi, DeFi, just pure NFTs. I'm not going to list them all because I'll get sidetracked, but each of those products is like super deep in and of itself. So I think you should, once stuff is rolling out, talk to the DeFi team on the more kind of like shape rotator stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
no,
sure, we will do that. But
we
I
definitely
just want to
plan
make like a
yeah. Go ahead.
yeah. I just want to make like a couple comments. Is like first thought was like, you know, how do I even when you said go 100% into something, in my mind was like translate that to believe in something, right? And I feel like that takes a lot of faith. And but the way you did it, also because you're obviously a shape rotator as well, and you did it with the feedback loops and really A/B testing and vibing it out. I was like, okay, cool, that's reasonable, but it takes a lot of commitment, right? You literally created different personas. And then on top of that, and then I was like, okay, then how do you find out like what is hip in the time? And then you mentioned about how, hey, you just tweet out something and see what is the response time. Right. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I
Yeah.
thought about, okay, so how do you, what kind of metrics do you judge like a code or an ecosystem or like something by? And then you mentioned, you know, TTD, like things to do versus TVL. And I was like, so it was like literally every single question I had, like you somehow just weaved right through them. I was like, okay, man, this is awesome. Like I don't have to answer a single thing and I'm getting all the answers I wanted.
Fair. I'm glad it worked out that way because it was not planned. This is
No,
like
Yeah.
Jani after dark. It's yeah.
we encourage this. Like we just go off the cuff. Like we love to shoot the shit like this. But yeah, Johnny, thank you so much for coming on. Where could people find the Honeycomb? You know what's funny, Kit? You know, I just realized we usually ask like, "Hey, like, who'd you have on as a
Yeah.
guest?" And he literally answered the question, like somebody from like your side on the DeFi team.
No,
Yeah.
so I would get on. There's the emergence of an interesting thing about cults is the emergence of pillars. So, for example, in the Chainlink Marines, you can kind of look back and go, okay, there were certain, outside of the foundation, there were these pillars of the community. And what I would say in terms of getting on from the Bera eco is there's already these kind of emerging pillars that are disconnected from the foundation, where there's, it's a small eco, we talk, but it's kind of a separate social force. And I think it would be interesting for you to speak with newly emerging pillars who maybe have tried other ecos, but then they've started to really firmly get bearer pill completely through to, let's say, kind of more midterm pillars. I won't name names now. We're at time, but that would be my strategy.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, you're free to name names if you want, quickly.
People often say that Lord Squigglebot the Third Pemberton is a good person. Like, sorry for your lot. Like, I feel bad suggesting this. Sorry for your loss if you do get him on. But some people like him. He's developed a group of people who, for no appearing reason, under apparent no duress, just burning the shit out of their financial assets and NFTs. So speaking to folks who've created products in this type of a way, where there's this barbell, kind of interesting stuff on the DeFi, clearly on some level, smart founder who speaks very well. Is kind of a good representation, I think, of that kind of left and right in the Bera eco. A newer emergent person that I'd speak to is the team over at Narrow Layer. Eileen over there is super interesting. I'll share a tiny bit of her lore that she shared on the timeline, but got tapped by Binance after creating a crypto waifu that grew to like 700,000 TikTok followers in a very short period of time. Who's building kind of something at the intersection of kind of AI and web IP, but also has a history, I think, at Netflix and Disney, but I could be fucking that up. So again, like we're seeing the emergence of these people who kind of sit at the intersection of like East and West and Web 2 and Web 3. A very big principle of mine is don't try and bring people to you, go where people are. So it's like A/B testing, data-driven, whatever, is just really about like go where the crowd is, and then figure out from there how to present stuff in a way where there's minimal effort, minimal movement, minimal kind of conviction needed on their part to tip. So those would be the two people I would suggest.
Got it. Yeah, noted. I've talked to Lord Pemberton before. Yeetarded. Definitely get him on here. And yeah, thank you so much, Jani, for coming on. And we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, brother.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the post-game show. I'm your host, DeFi Dave, here with Capital K. And we are finishing off a hell of an episode with Jani, with the janitor himself. I'm just kind of speechless from this one because we went in so many different, we went in like not a lot of different directions, but we went deep in like certain rabbit holes. Like what is a cult? Like feedback loops, cybernetics, Berachain, these like specific things. And what I liked about this episode is how Jani he'll go off on a tangent, but he'd always intertwine it back. He would always intertwine it back into these different subjects and how they relate to each other. He would always go back and answer the question. Kit, I know you were quiet listening for most of this.
No,
one,
I was literally speechless.
Yeah.
I was literally speechless during the pod until the very last like 5 minutes.
And as you mentioned, you said that like you would think of questions and then Jani would just answer them. It's like you guys had some like
it was like
going.
eerie. Yeah, it was eerie. Like I really could just sat back and then he just. But then you also guided really well because one of the questions I was thinking is like, things always start out great, but how do you make it last? Right? You're here for a good time and a long time, and then you ask that. I was like, oh, perfect. I really don't have to say anything this pod. I just gotta sit back and listen.
There are definitely some things I wanted clarified in the episode, and like I feel like I put on your hat for this episode. It was the word cell putting on like, all right, like let's dig into this, explain this. Like, what is your definition of culture as compared to the traditional definition? And he said something along the lines of like, active participation in cultivating something, in cultivating an idea and a movement. And I think the garden, when he talks about gardening, it was actually like quite fitting for the whole episode, because gardening is kind of like a microcosm of building a culture. You have to take your time, you have to be patient. You're doing certain things to like make sure it grows. You do the same thing with the culture as well. The inputs are just different. So instead of like a plant, it's like literal people and memes. So great episode. Go ahead.
Dude, and he is just like, I'm so impressed at how, like, when you said we went in so many different directions, like, I don't think so. I think we went in one direction, just a long path, right? And he took us through like the scenic route.
We went deep in like certain holes. It may have felt like a lot of different directions because it was just like
I didn't. I felt like it was just like we were just going down this path together. And I feel like another thing about Jani's,
the janitor was a bus driver.
Yeah, the janitor switched to the bus driver, and I can tell that he has this other switch that he can turn on and go full shape rotator. Because then, like, obviously, the Honey Jar TXJ is a venture studio that actually has to build and ship product, right? And you can't be just like that all the time. You need to have this other half.
We should do a shape rotator episode.
Yeah. With Jani, is switch it up, right? It's like, you're not rotating.
We'll do it during the day. But this was definitely This is definitely the subconscious nightbook episode.
Yeah. It was awesome. But yeah.
If you want to catch that episode in the future, you know what you got to do. You got to hit that bell button, subscribe, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Give us a like. Follow us on all our socials on Twitter, X, TikTok, and Telegram at Flywheel DeFi. You can follow me on Twitter, X at DeFiDave22.
You can follow me at 0x_K.
And we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Everything said in this episode is not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly for educational purposes and is not an investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice whatsoever. Please talk to your accountant and do your own research.